Serving Newman Grove their breakfast since the 30s, the City Cafe is an example of how a small town business can survive things like the pandemic and inflation.
These are kind of a dying breed, the small town cafe diner.
But Adam and Don Witchell make it work by being flexible. A comfortable scene welcoming outsiders and encouraging regulars.
If you're driving 100 miles, I'm going to give you 5 minutes of my time to hear how you ended up here. Our target audience used to be people within a 3-block area. Even though it's old news to us, or we've heard the story, or we know what's going on here, it's always new to someone else.
Their novelty also supporting the local economy.
It'd make a lot of difference on traffic in town if we didn't keep that going.
But residents also tell NCN they value it as a proud landmark to Newman Grove.
Welcome to the Fan Forum, the show where we learn about Husker Nation one fan at a time by asking him the same 4 questions. Tonight we have Adam Witchell from the Newman Grove City Cafe. Welcome to the Fan Forum, Adam.
Thank you very much. Pumped to be here.
Yeah, no, we're pumped to have you here. And as it said here on the cover, keeping the proud tradition of a small town cafe alive within Newman Grove, Nebraska, and that little video intro there kind of spoke to that. We're going to get your history and what you and your wife Dawn did to bring back that cafe after it had closed for a while. But before we get to that, let me get to our sponsors here, and then we're going to get into the forum. Redcasters, Fan Formers, we have Alumni Hall here, 2 Lincoln locations, downtown 1120 P Street, South Point Pavilions, next to Barnes & Noble. Pipeline Jerky, go to pipeline-jerky.com, use Redcast as a code, and you get 10% off. Smack and Smooch, custom shirts, specialty items. Find them on Facebook and Twitter at Smack and Smooch. Get yourself shirts and koozies. They do custom orders. And last but not least, Hail Varsity. Go to hailvarsity.com/subscribe. Use the promo code REDCAST. Get 10% off your annual subscription. Adam, welcome to the forum here. This is a lot of fun here. We do the same 4 questions for every single person that's on it here. Why are you a Husker fan? What is your favorite Husker fan memory? Who are your all-time favorite Huskers? And how do you think the Huskers will do next year? But before we get to that, let's just talk for a second. It's Christmas season here. I'm guessing you guys have been pretty busy and everything. I'm seeing some things with pies going, pies and cookies and stuff being sent down to Omaha. Tell us a little bit about the business and how's that going and everything going on here with the Christmas season for you.
Well, the City Cafe is kind of a small mom and pop place on Main Street, Newman Grove. We ended up coming across it on, of all places, Craigslist. We found it listed on sale listed for sale on Craigslist. And we came up kind of on a whim, just kind of curious to see what it was. It was a turnkey operation. And 8 years later, we're shelling out pies to Omaha and surrounding communities and, trying to find a niche, I guess, for ourselves.
Well, and I love the fact that you guys are, in small town Nebraska, but you are both from Omaha. So you're from the largest metro in the area, but you wanted to leave the metro to go to a small town, find a place, and you found that home there in Newman Grove.
It's funny because the population in Newman Grove is probably about a similar size to our graduating high school classes. So it's kind of crazy when we put that in perspective. But I think when Don and I got married originally, our ultimate goal was to get into some sort of a small mom and pop kind of business. It wasn't necessarily a cafe. We've looked at a few different things along the road, but the cafe kind of came up at a time where we were kind of looking at some different things, and we kind of had some serious discussions about it and took the plunge. And we could have zigged or zagged a couple different ways, and it might have been different, but we've been pretty fortunate to be where we are now.
Well, a lot of the Redcasters, they know that the majority of us, Dave, Boomer, Mac, and I, we're from Columbus originally. Sure. One of the tweets here of the week, as we always start off with, this is from last summer, and I had a chance to meet you there in the flesh there, and had a great breakfast there. I took my entire family there, my sister and brother-in-law and mom and dad, and I think my brother-in-law's parents came along. I mean, we had a caravan, about 8, 9 people, and as you see in the photo here, we swapped some swag. So
out, yeah.
Yeah, you gave me the koozie and the sticker, which right now we have the sticker here on the microphone. Here's the koozie. And I gave you some red podcast swag there as well. So, and my dad, who's very hard to please, he speaks about the hash browns there are crispy the way he wants them. And I'm telling you, if you can get Mike Honke to say something positive about the food there, if you want him over there, that's a job well done. And the food is outstanding. I've been there several times, and it's a great place to go.
Well, thank you.
And while I guess since I'm doing a little bit of promoing here for Columbus, I just want to give a promo here too. I don't know if you can see it because of the shininess, but Wonderlicks, Tom and Jerry batter. This is just a free plug for them. It's a Columbus institution to have Tom and Jerry's, and that's what I've been having here. It's kind of I don't know if a glorified eggnog is the way to say it, but you throw a little bit of rum and a little bit of brandy into it, and you've got a party. And well, it's the forum night, so I'm having a little party here, guys. So. Well, the next tweet here, and this came from this morning here, and it is cold right now. And this tweet took off for you, Adam. You wrote, want to know what a negative 40 wind chill, want to know what a negative 40 wind chill doesn't stop. And here it is. You've got a cafe full this morning. Cold day.
It doesn't stop the coffee guys, that's for sure. No.
I would imagine a cold day like this gets more people in for coffee. I mean, that would be appropriate.
I mean, maybe if there would have been 6 inches of snow, we wouldn't have seen as many of them, but we didn't really get a lot of snow up here, just the cold and the wind. And they all want to, the sun was out this morning, so they want to see what's going on. And there's actually more traffic on Main Street than I thought there would be with the cold weather. Those guys kind of attributed to some of that.
Yeah, I'm in the basement, Redcast Central here, and it's a little chilly down here. So I've got the full jacket on and even the hoodie because it still is chilly down here, man. -7 or whatever, I think, outside. Well, let's get to the questions here. I mean, these are tough ones. I'm going to throw a bunch of hard balls at you here, Adam, but we'll start with question number 1. Why are you a Husker fan?
It's funny because I grew up as a younger kid. We didn't really have a sports family. My mom wasn't into sports. My brother wasn't. My dad was kind of a casual Husker fan. As a little kid, I kind of remember maybe like the Oklahoma game being on or something like that, but it wasn't like a religious thing every Saturday where the radio was on or the TV was on. But he ended up taking us down to the spring game. I don't know if it was like 87, 88. And I just remember going into that stadium and being in awe because it's obviously the largest thing at that time I'd ever seen. You know what I mean? And just even then it wasn't quite the crowd that they have now for spring games, but there was still a lot of people there, and it left an impression on me. And then it kind of slowly, from that point on, kind of started paying attention a little more. I was in that 8, 9, 10-year-old kind of range, and it kind of got me hooked. And so I've kind of been following along ever since.
So age-wise, what would those years have been about for you kind of as you're 8, 9? What are some of those first seasons that you remember?
Oh, 89, 90, 91, kind of in that range, kind of pre-title teams,
Mm-hmm. It's funny. We've talked with players from that time frame too, and it's like, gosh, I hate to talk badly of only winning 9 and 10 games, but that was right. Those teams were just on the precipice of right before the dynasty, right? You only went 10-2 and made it to the Orange Bowl, but yeah, that was a time. In fact, that time that you're talking about, that was some of the most pressure that was on Osborne. One of those seasons, I think it was the 90 season, he finished with 3 losses out of the last 4 games, and there was pressure on him. I mean,
Georgia Tech loss in the bowl game, and
that Citrus Bowl, that was a tough gasp. I think he finished outside the top 20, somewhere between 20 and 25.
I can't.
There was a lot of pressure. I remember when I first met my wife. There was we were driving to work one morning, and they had a commercial from, I think it was Nebraska Furniture Mart. And it was in August, and the commercial was something like, buy something here and you'll get entered into getting some tickets for the bowl game. And Kathy asked me, she goes like, well, what if Nebraska doesn't make a bowl game? And I'm like, what? What do you mean Nebraska doesn't make a bowl game?
That's not possible.
Come on. I've lived my entire life. I mean, we not only do we make bowl games, we make New Year's bowl games every single time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't.
We're not playing December 17th. We're playing on the 31st or the 1st. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, give me a break. And then, and actually, that would have been 2003 that happened. So the next year we didn't make a bowl game because that was the first year of Callahan. So there's some crazy things there. But you mentioned going to the stadium. Here's another tweet here. and this was from Fan Day this year back in August. And there you are. I found you. One of the photos there from.
There's a couple kids right next to me there that are getting autographs. I'm not hanging out by myself there, but yeah, they started doing Fan Day. I don't know, 10-ish years ago, and kind of on a whim, I took my oldest at the time, who was probably 4 or 5. We had like an afternoon together off, and I'm like, let's go down and do this. It's free. We can walk around the stadium, kind of flashing back to my first time, for the spring game. And we've kind of made that like an annual thing now. And now that, she has a little sister, I take both of them, and we take a little football, and we'll kind of find a spot somewhere on the field to play catch a little bit. We'll walk up and down, East Stadium or West Stadium or, North Stadium, and roam around. We'll usually find probably the shortest line that we can get in to get autographs, because they don't really care. It's just the experience, and we have a blast. And somehow we'll tie and go into the dairy store for ice cream or Ivana cone or something. Sweetens the deal for them.
Well, and that's the thing. We talked a little bit before we started on the show tonight, and just like any Husker fans say, the last few years have been rough on the field, but Husker football and Husker athletics in general, it's more than just wins and losses. It's those shared memories that you have of whatever your traditions are. My dad used to take us to a Tasties at 48th and Holdridge, and get a big old bucket of onion chips to drive home. Actually, we did 2 buckets, one for the kids in the back, and Dad would eat a bucket by himself. Right. And onion chips could cause problems halfway on the ride home, by the way. But that's a side story. But those are memories of coming to Lincoln and going to games and doing things. Absolutely. And you taking your kids there to signing days or fan days like that, and going to dairy stores, and they associate that way. I mean, that's a memory, whether we're going 3-9 or 9-3, it doesn't matter. Right.
And they don't care either. I'm just trying to kind of give them the experience, and maybe that builds something for the future that, they kind of keep a kind of a lifelong passion for it, or an interest in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nothing else, we're making memories, right? So,
I asked you a little bit about, before we started here too, what is it like? I'm big on in-state recruiting, and just I love everything that goes on inside the borders of this state and how it revolves around the athletic, programs. I love it, whether it's football, basketball, women's basketball, volleyball, you name it. What is a Saturday like in Newman Grove, whether it's at the cafe or just in the town in general? What is small town Newman Grove like on a college football Saturday?
Well, if it's an 11 o'clock kick and it's a home game, it's dead because the vast majority of the town is probably in Lincoln, either tailgating and going to the game. It kind of just depends. If they're away games, we might have a decent crowd in the morning, and then we might have a little bump during halftime. For a little rush. It just kind of depends on home and away and what's going on. So
that's kind of. I remember growing up, and you go to a game at Memorial Stadium, you see all the signs, and it would be, Columbusans for Nebraska, and, North Lupins for Nebraska, and, North Platte people for Nebraska, and everything. And it was that the town shut down. The walk-on program was so big, and that it would almost every town or every county would have some kid, whether scholarship or walk-on, somebody that's on the team, and just that's that connection that it unites and brings people together, whether you're from the Panhandle or the furthest east part of the state. It doesn't matter. And
absolutely.
Love that. And you've got to experience it in 2 different ways. Again, I think it's kind of cool to experience it from you grew up in Omaha, and now that you're living in Newman Grove, I think you get to see it kind of in 2 different ways. But it's all the same, man. People wearing red and root for the Huskers.
If there's one common ground between the rural and urban divide of this state, it's the Huskers. So
that's right.
Oh, maybe pie. I don't know.
and pie. Absolutely. What is your favorite Husker fan memory? Question number 2.
Oh, I've got a couple of them. The first one. So my parents split up when I was about 10, and they both remarried. And my dad remarried a gal who was a diehard Husker fan. And they ended up, they're settled down in Utan, Nebraska now, just west of Omaha, out by Wahoo. And so we would do, weekend visits with Dad, and Husker game days was kind of a big thing. Like, she would have kind of a party there. You know what I mean? We'd have snacks, and it was like a fun thing. And so I remember being out there for the '94 Orange Bowl, the first title team for Osborne. and just like it was this. I remember being there the year before watching the '93 one, the close but the missed kick at the end, and like just kind of like the feel of defeat after that game. And so like we were pumped up watching that '94 bowl game, and when they won it, it was like when Schlesinger scored twice there, at the end of the fourth quarter there, it was just like, are we dreaming? Is this really happening? Oh my God. And so like we were just ecstatic over the moon. But the thing is, I went to school in Omaha, in North Omaha, at Omaha North, and I had wrestling practice the next morning. So I had to crank up early and have Dad take me all the way back into town to school for practice. But we stopped at Cubby's along the way, along Highway 92 outside of UTAN there, and we got the paper. And it was the famous, At Last cover with Osborne on the shoulders. And I just remember in the back seat of the car there just pouring over, all of the articles and all of the stats of that game there. Just, this is crazy. You know what I mean?
I'm looking down here. Somewhere here I have a bunch of newspapers, and I swear I have that.
I have a couple copies of the pages after each of the bowl games there, each of those title teams. And I don't know what I'm going to ever do with them. They're just sitting, in a closet, but I can't just get rid of them. You know what I mean? But it just, I don't know. It's just kind of, it's just a vivid memory I have is kind of enjoying it with them, and then kind of, reading up on it that next day there. So,
being from Columbus and having Schlesinger scoring those 2 touchdowns.
I'm sure you guys were like,
yeah,
the hometown hero right there.
Yeah. I mean, that was insane to think that. His dad, his sanitation business, he owned a sanitation business, and my parents were on the route. And so I grew up, and the Schlesinger, you knew when the Schlesinger the truck was coming down the street, because he had it painted on it like a Husker emblem with number 40 on it. And then eventually when Corey was on the Lions, he even had a Lions helmet painted on it with number 30. And there was one time vividly I remember, and this would have been 92-ish. I'm guessing Corey would have been like a sophomore to junior, and it was over the summertime, so maybe he was home for a week helping his dad or something. But I remember waking up on a Tuesday morning, summertime, I'm at home, and I hear the noise outside, and they're taking the trash to the thing. And I look out the window, and there's Corey not wearing a shirt, and he's got his hands up, and he's carrying one of our trash cans. And he just throws it in there, and it looked like the Hulk was just walking away with our trash and throwing it away. He was that was an awesome.
But that right there is kind of like, I think, a good analogy for Husker football is, you know what I mean? It's kind of rolling up your sleeves, or not having sleeves in that case. But, the blue collar, the work ethic right there, there's a snapshot of it, and it's not all just flash in the pan there. There's something that's being built there. So.
Yeah, and he was, wildly popular down there in Detroit as well. I mean, they loved him. It's the toughness that a fullback brings. I hope Coach Rule brings back a fullback. I think that's such an appropriate position to kind of speak to the toughness that is Nebraska football and the history here. And you could, whether it's the Macavickas or you go down the list, 8-man football, 6-man football. That's part of the fabric of it here.
What better way to win a title, especially Osborne's first title, than with a couple traps up the middle? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah. And it wasn't like it was a run heavy time in college football back then. It wasn't. There's all these teams were going to the pass. We were the dinosaurs that were still running what we were running, but nobody could stop it. And what I think is kind of funny is right now you're starting to see there's a renaissance of power football coming back to football in general. You see it at the pro level, where the Eagles right now are the top team in the NFL, and their quarterback Jalen Hurts ran for over 100 yards in the first quarter a couple weeks ago against the Packers. You see it in college. Look at what Michigan's done the last couple of years against Ohio State, where Michigan gets great talent. I don't want to say they don't get great talent. That wouldn't be fair. But even they kind of said, we're not going to compete with Ohio State on a talent by talent, position by position basis. But what we can do is we can create an advantage by playing a style that they don't play. And we're going to be tougher than anything. We're going to be physical, and we're going to line up under center, and we're going to run it at them. And that's something that not a lot of teams are doing.
Yeah, it challenges the matchups, and it kind of gives you a little edge there. I mean, Navy did that for years and years too, running a power eye. And I mean, they obviously weren't contending, but they were always having bowl games and successful seasons. Because they were kind of the odd man out. They were the leftover odd man. They're running that, but it's hard to stop. But
Well, that 94 team, the first Husker team to win a national championship, tons of talent. I don't want to make it sound like it was devoid of talent, but I would certainly argue there were two teams on our schedule that year, Miami in the Orange Bowl and definitely Colorado, teams that had much more NFL talent and
absolutely
were probably better talented teams, but they couldn't physically stop what we did.
Yeah.
That
Colorado team had Salam, right? The Heisman winner.
Oh my gosh, they had Salam,
I mean?
they had Christian Fourier at tight end, they had Westbrook at receiver, they had Cordell Stewart, they had I think 8 or 9 guys on the defense that played in the pros. It was crazy. Yeah, they were just it was a ton of talent, but that physicality can create advantages and take away certain, talent advantages that the other team has. The Miami game's a perfect example of that. I mean, they have Warren Sapp and Ray Lewis on the same defense. That's an all-pro studded, group there. And they were outstanding in the first 2 to 3 quarters of it. It was hard to do things. I remember a play where Sapp with one hand tackled Lawrence Phillips by the horse collar and pulled him down. Like that, it was just incredible play. An incredibly talented guy. And by the fourth quarter, they were gassed. And they weren't playing the same way.
I think you have to give the O-line at that game probably the most props. I mean, they just kept grinding them down. So,
you ever talk to Matt Verzal about some of those old days?
Oh, I do, yeah.
I mean, it had to be so much fun to be on one of those lines where you know that you see the other team, the hands are on their hips and on their knees, and they're sucking for air, and you know that you can just do what you want to do because you've set them up. You've done it the last 2-3 quarters, and now you can have your way with them. That's just got to be just a dominating feeling.
It's got to be a great feeling. You know what I mean? Just knowing it's kind of trending your way there, and there's nothing they can do to stop it.
Absolutely. Well, along the way here, I've got a couple photos that I want to show, and this one here, this is kind of takes it back to the whole family thing behind what you guys do. Because I think anyone that does a small business and entrepreneurs out there, you realize that it's not just you doing it; it is a family affair, and kids are involved and everything. Tell us a little bit about your family here and everything. And I love the sign here. Hey, all you cool cats, kittens, thank you. So
that was a snapshot. So during COVID, there was kind of a thing. I don't know if this was like a thing across the country or if this was just a local thing, but there was a couple people doing like what they called porch photos. So when we were still supposed to be, 6 feet apart and masked up, they would go around and take pictures of people like on their front porch to kind of like I think it was just supposed to be kind of a glimpse into a moment of a pandemic. I don't know. But so we had a gal come and she did it. She went through town and offered services to take pictures, and she did it free and kind of just shared them with people. And so we did it. So the cool cats and kittens is kind of a thing to the Tiger King there. But that's my wife, Dawn, obviously on the far left. And then Allison's our youngest, and she's in first grade this year. And then Elise is our oldest, and she's a freshman at Newman Grove. And I mean, it really is hands-on. I mean, Dawn and I have spent the last, 4 or 5 nights up here till 11, 12, kind of cranking pies out for the holiday and cookies and whatnot. And, the kids are up here helping, and it's just, it's kind of a family thing.
Now, Newman Grove, they've consolidated for athletics, right? With Albion, but Newman Grove itself still has a school, correct?
Newman Grove still has pre-K through 12, so they still have a school. The graduating class this year, we have a senior that works for us, is 8, but it's slowly trending into some bigger numbers. I know there's a class 5th or 6th grade, I think, has got 16 or 17 kids. Elisa's class is like 13, so it's slowly trending back up, but it's one of those things that we're it was a huge selling point for us when we came up here, was that there was a school in town and they weren't on a bus 15 miles or 20 miles to a different town. And so that was a huge selling point for us. And we're proud to have a school in town.
Well, I have family from originally from North Loop, Nebraska, which is Valley County near Ord. Yeah. And my mom was one of the first students to go to North Loop, Scotia, back in the 60s. And that was one of the first consolidated schools.
Right.
Since then, now North Loop, Scotia is consolidated with Greeley and Walback, a couple other towns. And now that I think it's called like Central Valley. And so that it's in their second iteration of it. But it's what you have to do in some cases, some of those towns. But I think it's so important to continue to have that. And I'll say one thing I hope is a positive long-term outcome that comes out of the pandemic. People realizing that they can work remotely hopefully gives an opportunity for people to maybe move to some of those small towns. And I have an example. My uncle lives in North Loop, and I was asking him this the other week, actually during Thanksgiving, and he mentioned how a young couple that was from Grand Island but was from that area originally, they just moved and bought a house in North Loop. The wife can work remotely, and the husband has to be in North Loop or in Grand Island, I think, like once a week or something like that. But something that's reasonable, and it gives an opportunity for these small towns, and maybe it can breathe some new life into there. And I think that remote side of it is interesting. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just in Newman Grove, there's been several other families that have moved in. The folks that run the grocery store across the street from us came from Pleasantdale, which is just outside of Lincoln, and it just, there's opportunities to be had. I suppose it depends on how much you want to get out of your comfort zone or how much of a risk you want to take. But I mean, we stumbled across this, and it was turnkey, and we kind of made the best of it. And we've grown profitable every year we've been here, and we've grown the business. And now we've touched in the Omaha and the Lincoln, the Grand Island communities, besides just the Newman Grove, Lindsay, Albion area. So, there's opportunities to be had if you want to take a plunge.
Well, and I think something you've done too, you've got some old school in you with some new school. So, I mean, hey, you're an entrepreneur. You bought the small town mom and pop store, but what you've done on social media, that's how obviously, I came in contact with you at first, and you've just done an unbelievable job, Facebook, Twitter, and reaching out. And I can only imagine what that reaches. I think, in fact, I was watching a video of you guys a while back, and I think maybe it was your wife was mentioning that, like, one time you guys posted something on social media, and I think it was some sheriffs or some police officers were at some convention, and they were in the area, and they saw it, and they came down and all ate at your place because of it.
There's several. We have several state troopers that follow the cafe, and there was a sergeant up in Norfolk, and she's out west now. She's out in the Panhandle, I think, in Scotts Bluff, but I don't know. She said she came in with this group of guys and was like, I made a point, I'm going to come here, just because we interacted here. And I'm like, that's awesome. And like, it's crazy the people that we interact with, especially Twitter's probably our bread and butter. And that's probably the page that we don't, the page the least amount of people on, you know what I mean? Facebook is everyone you know. Twitter's people you don't really know in real life. And it's just amazing the amount of people that have given up time and driven the 4-hour round trip from Omaha or Lincoln up here just to come up here and eat and say hi. And we've had people that have done it multiple times now, or they'll make a day of it and they'll go to the antique store here or whatever. And I just think that's awesome. It just, and all it is just kind of engaging with people and reaching out, and acknowledging people.
Yeah, my family, one year we love doing like the wineries in the state.
Sure.
My parents one year did the entire Passport, I think it was, where they hit every single winery in there. But one of the things I love about doing that is it takes us to places a lot of times you wouldn't normally go. You're going to some small towns, and you're in areas that you don't always get to. And then along the way, of course, you stop at a restaurant in this town, and you stop at a cute little store over here in this town. And in Newman Grove, when we went there the first time, because we've been there a couple times to your guys' place, but yeah, that little the antique store that was next to it, we stopped there for 30 minutes and ended up buying a bunch of Christmas gifts there.
and they love that.
Oh my gosh! And my colleague Carl, coworker of mine, they had a day off, him and his wife, and it was a couple months back, and he was tweeting with you back and forth.
Yep.
And he's like, "Yep, we're coming down on a Thursday." They just took a day off in the middle of the week, and basically the trip was from Lincoln to go to Newman Grove. Now along the way, they had a couple stops they did in some small towns, but the idea, the concept that I'm leaving Lincoln, Nebraska to drive to Newman Grove just to basically eat and then come back home. I mean, that was kind of cool. And that's something that social media and just being an entrepreneur and going out there and doing what you're doing, it doesn't cost you anything. And
we're trying to kind of help, we're a small cog on this main street, but like a huge selling factor for Newman for us was it was a vibrant main street for the size of it. You know what I mean? There weren't empty buildings, or it wasn't desolate. It has a grocery store. It has a bowling alley. It has an antique store. It has a quilting shop. We have a neighbor across the street, catty corner from us, that kind of has like a home decor shop. There's several salons. And like, I thought that was awesome that this main street was so active. and I feel like, that kind of is small town America to me. You know what I mean? And like, I feel like you can do it. There's opportunities to be had out there. And, if you're engaging with people, they'll come and support you. And we've had a lot of support in the last 8 years. So,
yeah. Well, I grew up in Columbus. I always remember as a kid, the thing I remember about Newman Grove, I had never been there as a kid, but I remember that it was right on the border of Madison County and Platte County. In fact, I think that part of the town, or maybe a few people live in Platte on that side, but I'd never been up there. And it wasn't until we came up there the first time to go and see you guys and eat there. And it is a cool little town. And like you said, you can tell those towns that take care of it themselves. They, the lawns are done nicely. The main street looked great. And it's a great town. If you haven't, Redcasters, Fanformers, if you haven't been up to Newman Grove, if you haven't been to the City Cafe, definitely take a day out. It is worth it. Monday through Friday, 7 to 2. It is absolutely worth it to get up there for breakfast, for lunch. We've done it multiple times with my family. It's been a lot of fun, and it is a great little town. There's a lot of cool towns around it too. So, I mean, again, if you haven't been to the area too, it's a neat area to get to. All right, well, let's get to question 3. Who are your all-time favorite Huskers?
I don't know that I have a specific person or people in mind. I feel like, every team, every couple of years, there's always, certain players that kind of stick out. I mean, most recently, I think of like Adrian Martinez, 2 a.m., and like JoJo Doman, I just, they kind of personified, that moment in time, those teams, you know what I mean? And like, kids that did it the right way and represented the university well and themselves well. And, go back to Behringer, in the mid 90s there and what he meant to the state. And, I don't know, I just kind of think, in that moment, there's certain people I can think back to a certain year or certain era and kind of think about how they kind of contributed to the team and the university.
Yeah, every time we've made a coaching change, you get some alumni guys that will come back and welcome the new guy. And what's always interesting is once a Husker, you're always a Husker. And so whether you were from the 60s or the 70s or the 80s or the 90s, whether you were in winning programs or non-winning, if you rep the Inn, if you wore it, I mean, you bled out there, you sweated for this program. That always means something. And that we've had great players and guys that have represented this program great, no matter who the coaching staff has been, no matter what the generation was. And there's a lot to be. I know it's tough as fans. I'm not pleasant around losses. I'm not a great. I get mad. I turn Twitter off, right? And so I say that because I'm not trying to make myself being more pious and like, oh yeah, I don't get mad when we lose. No, I get frustrated and I get mad. Right. But at the end of the day, there's been a lot of great players and a lot of great things that have happened in this program, even the last 10 years, even the last 5 years that we've been doing this podcast. Even without winning seasons, there's still positive things that come out of it. And I think Adrian's a great example of that.
I kind of thought of him initially. And we've seen, I mean, he's had some injury issues down at K-State. But, early on in the season, he was doing great things down there. He seems to be, I don't know him personally, but he seems to be a great kid that's well-spoken and represents himself and his university, whether it's here or, Nebraska or K-State now. But represents that well. And I have an appreciation for that. You know what I mean? So.
In a great family, the second that he was basically leaving for K-State, and by the way, he walked out of this university with a degree from the University of Nebraska. He's an alumni, and but when he left, his dad saw on Twitter. I posted some stuff, and my son is autistic, and I took him to some games, and he's wearing his headphones and all that. Sure. And his dad reached out to me and was just really nice, and he's like, "Hey, would Alex like some 2 a.m. swag?" And just out of the blue, just sent me a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm like, that's hard not to root for a kid like that. It's hard not to root for a family like that.
Yeah. Great character.
Yeah, exactly. And I even mentioned this on our Redcast last night. I think this is another family of great character. Malachi Coleman, who just committed here yesterday. Yeah. His mom tweeted out yesterday. She tweeted out to Deion Sanders and the coaches at Colorado just to thank them for bringing them in, even though they didn't commit there, just to thank them and kind of a public, statement of that. And I'm like, man, it's the new way of doing something very old school. Hey, if you get a gift at Christmas here, what should you do? Write a thank you note.
Thank you note, right?
Yeah, and it's a lost art. And when I saw her tweet that out, I was like, gosh, you almost never see that kind of thing. I thought it was so cool. And that's so hopefully, what we're getting is we're getting a great kid, and we're getting just one more great family. And that's Husker football there too. Well, here's the next photo. And this is to show you at work. I mean, this is real work you got to do here. The food doesn't create itself. So, there you are, in the kitchen there making can you tell what you're making there? That looks like a burger of some kind.
It's a sriracha burger, I believe.
Ooh, the sriracha burger. And I do see a pie next to that. So the pies, that's the big business, right? Pies.
That's the big business. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be cranking out pies for a living.
What's the biggest seller of pie for you?
In Newman Grove, lemon meringue and cherry are the two biggest. Talking with Vers, it sounds like in Omaha, Toll House, which is like essentially a chocolate chip cookie in a pie shell, or in pie crust, and peanut butter are the popular ones down in Omaha. But yeah, sometimes it just depends on the day. There's an old fashioned pie called sour cream raisin, which sounds not appealing, but if you try, kind of a warm pie. It feels like a fallish pie. It has like clove and cinnamon and that kind of stuff in it, with a meringue top. But yeah, probably cherry and lemon there.
When you took over the cafe, did you keep some of the old recipes that they used to do, or did you kind of start over from scratch? How did that go for you?
A little bit of both. We got a little bit. So the gal that we bought it from had run it for 25 years. And so we kind of inherited some of her recipes there. Not all of them. There were some family ones that went with the family, but we've also just kind of gotten creative and roll our sleeves up and come up with some different ideas. We've got no shortage of church cookbooks, both locally here, old church cookbooks, and some that we brought from, the congregations we attended when we were in Omaha. And, we've had people request certain ones that we've kind of done a little, deep dive into and kind of crafted a little bit of a pie list out of all of that. So,
Well, deep dive. Let's take a deep dive. And then the question number 4, and this is the question. It almost takes the amount of time of the first 3 questions combined, but it is how do you think the Huskers will do next year? And for the time being, I've kind of rephrased this a little bit. So early in the offseason, maybe not so much how do you think they're going to do, but maybe what are your early expectations at least? Coach Rule has now been on 25 days in the position. He just announced his first recruiting class yesterday. How do you kind of assess what he's done in these early few weeks? He's building his staff. What are your early thoughts, early expectations?
National title or bust.
I love it. There you go.
No, in all honesty, I hope to get them to a bowl game. If we can get some momentum going and get to, some sort of a bowl game, I think that would be a huge step in the right direction. I like 6-6, 7-5, something along that lines. I would like to see them maybe get, the Wisconsin Monkey or some of these, other teams, these Big Ten teams that have had their number since they've joined in the last decade, kind of, get a win from that, in one of those games and kind of shake some of that off. But yeah, I'm hoping for a bowl game, if nothing else, something to look forward to after Thanksgiving,
Yeah. How good of a feeling was that Iowa win and getting that monkey off the back, 7 straight losses?
It was great. It was, especially Iowa, well, yeah, Iowa, Wisconsin, it just, for some reason, those two teams, just seem to have had their number. And it was great to kind of at least cap off that season with that win.
I've mentioned I grew up in Columbus and I've lived in Lincoln. I've never lived in Omaha. Now, when we joined the Big Ten, there was a lot of, you could tell there was friction between like Omaha and Iowa, obviously being right on the border with each other. Growing up there, do you feel differently about Iowa because you're from Omaha, or does that change anything with you there?
No, I mean, Iowa's, the Big Ten was such a transition. Like we went so many years where Colorado and Oklahoma were like the hated teams, like despised them. And I was always like, yeah, okay, whatever, we'll play you every 20 years, for a series, home and home series. And it really wasn't a thing. And then it just kind of felt forced early on. And it kind of slowly transitioned. It feels kind of like that Colorado game used to be, you know what I mean? Where you just, maybe it's the black, gold, black, yellow. I don't know, but it is, it's kind of transitioned to that. And yeah, but early on, it really didn't feel like a rivalry. Maybe it does more so down there now, but
yeah, I think it took losing seven.
We all hate Iowa, so
yeah. I mean, for a number of Husker fans early on in it, it was, I know for the first few years, they're beneath us. We are a big blue blood, and they haven't won as many as us. And so, there were fans that thought that that's not a rivalry because of that.
Right.
And it took 7 straight losses and a humbling.
Yeah.
And when we beat them,
some of them bad losses. I mean, it wasn't like everything was close. I mean, there was a 56-14 game not too many years ago, and that stings a little more than we lost in the last second field goal or something.
Yeah, the bloodbath that Mark Banker talked about. That their practices must be a bloodbath because they were just so much more physical. Frost, lost by a combined 19 points in 4 years to them. Yeah. So there was maddening close losses under Frost, but they're losses nonetheless.
Right.
I think what was interesting with Colorado and Oklahoma was I don't think I realized, because it had been so long, it had been 7-8 years since we had been in the Big 12. And we never really we just don't have that close rival yet because we don't have the history built up. And when we went and played Colorado in 19 and we were there in Boulder, I went to Norman 2 years ago, for the Oklahoma game, and it took no time. It was instantly back. I was like, oh my gosh, that feeling of I hate these guys, or we've got to beat these guys. This is our longtime rival, and we will never have that in some regards in the Big Ten just because we don't have the history of it.
Right.
But you see that with an Iowa or Minnesota or Wisconsin. They have that with each other because they've played each other 100 times. They're trading pigs back and forth and whatever trophies. Right. So
they all have trophies for it. So
and by the way, the coolest trophy, I still think, is Nebraska and Minnesota, that $5 bits of broken chair, and how that just came out of so organically out of nothing. I mean, it was a Twitter spat between a gopher and a fake Bo Pelini, and what's come out of that, that's I don't even look at it's not even like I look at Minnesota as some big rival. I just think that's just the coolest thing, and I love the trophy and how it came out of it, and none of it's forced. It didn't feel like it was. That anyone's saying they're a rival. It's just, hey, that game means something there.
It seems more authentic than the Heroes Trophy with Iowa. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's when you throw a corporate feel around something and then try to make it something special. A lot of times it loses it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, we're talking about next season, and I think what I'm going to kind of use as my quote or whatever for this off season is I'm going to call it the race to 6. I hate putting ceilings on anything, right? Like we can go 12-0 next year. I'm not saying that, but we can, right? So I'm not going to say we're going to go 6-6. It's the race to 6. Can we get? Maybe it takes 6 weeks to get there, and we're 6-0. Maybe in week 12 against Iowa we're 5-6, and we need to win that game to get to 6 wins. Yeah, whatever it is. I mean, you think of Kansas this year started off 5-1. Under Lance Leipold, and they ended up 6-6. Hey, they made 6.
They made it. They made a bowl game.
They made it. So I don't care how it is. The race to 6, and hey, if it takes us 8 weeks and we're 6-2, we can reevaluate our expectations. Now let's win 7, 8, or 9, right? But the first goal is let's get to 6, and I do think it's important. Look, I'm not if we go 5-7 next year, I'm not going to be calling for Rule's head or anything, but I think it is. I also think it's important that he shows like a tangible sign of progress, and making a bowl is such a tangible sign right now.
Even at 5-7, it kind of depends on how those 7 losses played out too. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. If you're competitive and it's just, you're just losing on, a fluke play or a last second kick or, whatever, that's different than getting blown out too. And so if you're at least competitive and it's trending in that direction, I'm on board.
Mm-hmm. I think what we all want to see too is a sign of progress would be like, even just in one game, if you beat some team that maybe people didn't think you're going to beat them, or there's a game where you clearly outcoached the opponent, and that outcoaching.
We haven't seen that in a while, is outcoaching anybody.
Yes. I mean, that's the part, I don't want to say this because I don't want to come off too brash and, we're going to go 12-0, but I think that we're going to, if the coaching improves, so if you play smarter football, if you play more sound, if you don't make mistakes, you're not jumping off sides and getting penalties and turnovers, if you play solid special teams, I mean, these are the things that those are expectations individually I have. Let's be a good special teams team. If you do all those things, 6-6 should be almost a foregone conclusion any season.
Well, I would think so. I mean, just fundamentals and discipline. You know what I mean? Those can lose you games, and if you could kind of clean that up a little bit, I really don't think 6-6, 7-5 is that unreasonable. And you're right. If you get 6-2, maybe you start looking at 8 or 9 wins. You know, if you get to 5 and you're rolling into Iowa, great. Let's try and get to a bowl game.
Yep.
But anything is better than 3 and 9, right?
Those seasons and the last few seasons too. What's interesting about how this next season starts is very rarely do we have 2 games on the road right away. Only 2 times in modern era. The 1995 season, we started at Oklahoma State and then at Michigan State in Nick Saban's first game there. And then in 76, I think was the other year. And I've got the glass set upstairs. My mom got it for me. And I think we played at at Indiana and maybe it was LSU or something. But very rarely do you start on the road 2 straight times. Well, we play at Minnesota in late August on a Thursday night, and then we come back and we play at Colorado. Coach Dion is I think his own home opener. They will play at TCU the week beforehand. So it's interesting. Is the last couple of years we've played these early games. Illinois a year ago, and then this year the Ireland game, and in both cases we fell flat. And the season felt almost over before September even turned on the calendar. And imagine having a little bit of early success next season, what that could do for the team. I think that's important for Rule 2 to have some kind of early success, whether that means going 1-1 or Hell's Bells winning 2. I don't know, but it'd be tough coming back to Memorial Stadium in week 3 at 0-2. That would be a tough one.
It'd be sweet if he could go out to Boulder there and knock Dion down a little bit, honestly.
Well, and that's a program going,
and that's a program that they've got such hatred for. Well, I mean, we say that as fans that watched it for our whole lives. I mean, kids on both of those teams weren't even around when this was a rivalry, so who knows? Maybe they don't have the hatred quite as much as we do, but it would be nice to go kind of humble, prime time down a little bit. But
yeah, and that's a 1-11 program right now that's going through their own rebuild too, and. And I think
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say Dion to me seems like there's a high risk, high reward with him. I mean, I think a lot of people look at him as it will either flame out, miraculously, terribly or whatever, or he could just
blow up.
And almost regardless of which way it goes, I think everyone looks at that and goes, he'll be gone in 2 years anyways. If it goes bad, he's gone. If he does great,
if he goes great, he's going to move on up.
Yeah, he'll go back down to the SEC or one of the schools, but I guess if I'm a Colorado fan, I'll take it if it means that you get this thing turned around from 1 to 11. Give me a little
notoriety, and you might turn it around potentially. But
but this next season is going to be an interesting one. How it starts off, the 2 away games. I'm interested too, watching yesterday's press conference on the new kids coming in. He also talked about the coaching staff. He talked about the offensive line, keeping Coach Raiola around and some things. And you get the sense. I'm really interested in what this offseason looks like from a physicality standpoint, practice. I'm a big practice guy. I've gone to coaches clinics from all the way from Solich all the way through Frost. So I've seen practices of all these different staffs, and I want to see some green jerseys off the quarterbacks. I want to see some old school stuff going, get under center and line up and hit guys and start to be that physical team. Mark Banker talked about Iowa having bloodbath practices. Yeah. I'd like to see us maybe have a couple little bloodbath practices too.
You talk to some of those guys in those title teams, and I know we keep glorifying and going back to the 90s, but I mean, those guys had some bloodbaths in practice too. And I think that's how you build this camaraderie and you build this team up,
Mm-hmm. Well, the offensive line back then, the pipeline guys would say the toughest defensive line they went against all season was in practice. And the defensive line guys, the Peters and all those guys would say the toughest offensive line we played against was on Wednesday during the goal line drill.
It was your easy day.
Yes, Saturday was a day off, right? And it's that mentality. I was asked that by somebody where they were talking about next season and how good is that offensive lineman going to do? You're going to find out against Minnesota or whatever when he's going against some, all Big Ten defensive end. And I'm like, well, if you're waiting until then to find out how they're going to do that, you've already wasted 8 months of off season. Right. I expect in spring practice, I expect, during all this off season that the competition has to be at a premium and the physicality has to be at a premium in practice. You can't wait until August to get it figured out. And if you're truly going to have a competition, especially at a position like quarterback, I don't know how you can do it without ever letting those guys go live. I've mentioned this on the air a number of times, but I was at the coaches clinic in 2005 when Zach Taylor won the starting position away from Joe Daly. And it was a 2-hour, 200-play practice, no green jerseys. Adam Carricker and LaKeven Smith and Stuart Bradley and Jay Moore.
Legit guys, yeah.
Those guys destroyed Zach Taylor at times. They'd cream him, but he'd get up, he'd get into a huddle, he'd call a play, he'd complete a pass, and he moved the offense in ways that we had struggled the year prior. And over the course of this 2-hour scrimmage, Joe Daly, by the end of it, was standing on the side of the sideline by himself, and you could tell that they had just kind of transferred the position, and we walked away from it. And Zach Taylor wasn't supposed to be that guy. The savior was going to be Harrison Beck, the big 4-star quarterback coming in. This Zach Taylor guy's just some JUCO guy, but man, you could see it, but you never could have figured that out. You never would have learned that if you have green jerseys on them and you're playing. Yeah, if you're playing touch football with the quarterback, you can't learn it. So I hope they have a good competition here. I think we're gonna have some deep rooms there. Hopefully Thompson is healthy enough and is coming back, and I like Jeff Sims coming in from Georgia Tech. I hope that we don't lose a guy like Smothers or Purdy, and let them compete. And there's some athletes in that room. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, there's a lot going on down there with that team that there's some I don't know. It's exciting, to think about what potentially could happen in the next year or two with some of those kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I also love the idea of recruiting in state, and this coaching staff made a big point of that. And small town Nebraska. There's a kid here in the next class from Ainsworth that's has an offer from Nebraska. We just went out to Scotts Bluff and got another kid from there. I remember it was at Wyatt, Missouri, I think was Albion.
He was a Boone Central kid.
Boone Central.
They won a title, the Class C title, first year we were up here. So yeah, and he was a good kid too.
Mm-hmm. And that's the stuff, you find kids from everywhere. Again, I keep bringing up Columbus, the hometown, but we just had Ernest Hausman, and I mean, I hate losing him, but he's going up to Michigan now, and there's great players all over the state, and so. I like what Rule is already starting to do with trying to build those relationships. And if we can get a coach to really show success, I think a successful sign of this program would be in 8 years, at the end of his 8-year contract, hopefully by then it's already been renewed several times over. But if in 8 years, if Coach Rule is our coach, that's a sign of success. So I'm not even throwing out records. If we have a coach that's here for 8 years, we need to start to get it. Yeah, something went right. We need that consistency. You think about it. It's been 25 years now since Coach Osborne left, and he was here for 25 years. So for 25 seasons, we had the consistency of him. Every year he had George Darlington on his staff. Milt Teneper was with him for 24 years. I think McBride was there like 21 years, and Solich. And I mean, the guys had been there with them for, well over a decade. And then the last 25 years, we're now on our 5th head coach and countless coordinators and position coaches. And so the bleeding has to stop somewhere, and you got to start to build some consistency. And hopefully we have the right guy here as the head coach. We all hope that the last guy was. Well, now it's the new guy, and I hope it's this guy, and I hope he's here for many, many years.
I hope so too. I mean, we all thought the last guy was the guy, and so the guy has got to be around the corner here, right? It's
Well, and that's the thing. That's the thing that Dave likes to say this. Redcast Dave says this a lot on the show, where the thing with Husker fans is that we'll never let this thing die. And I erroneously, I said this when Frost was first hired. I'm like, if it doesn't work with him, it's not going to work. And Dave's like, that's not true. If it doesn't work with him, we'll get someone else. And we're going to keep getting someone else until you get that right person. And there's historical reference to this. When Devaney got here in 61, I mean, there was 20 years prior to that where we had gone through 7-8 coaches, and I don't think anybody necessarily looked at Devaney and thought, oh, this guy is the one that's going to stop it. But we hope, right? Devaney wasn't the first option. Fans, they had wanted someone else in front of him, but didn't get him, so they got Devaney. So they get their backup guy. but he comes in here and he made fans feel good. He went around the state, went to small towns, went to VFWs, and just told people, how important they were to the program, and that, this is the state owns this program, and got people feeling good. And then he demonstrated some early success to go along with it. And the combination of that led him to a good start. And I think when I think of Coach Rule right now, I didn't know anything about him really a month ago. And when you start listening to him talk, and I mean, he talks differently than other coaches in terms of being, like tangibly, he talks different than other coaches. Frost couldn't inspire the way that he does.
Right.
Pelini wasn't that kind of guy. Riley was super nice, but Riley wasn't going to inspire that way. Callahan wasn't going to do that. I mean, this is really, he's got a lot of Devaney kind of traits in him from a speaking standpoint. So he'll make you feel good. Now, hopefully the results, this is where I think it's important to have that race to 6 in year one is, show some results to go along with it.
Maybe this is a case of history repeating itself, and he's the start of another long stretch. I don't know.
Oh man, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be? I was thinking about this the other day. If you think about history repeating itself, we were just talking about Twitter. Could you imagine what Twitter would have been like in 1961 or 62? Like Devaney would have used it, right? And then if Osborne takes over, I could see Osborne like, I'm not messing around with this thing. But Devaney, he'd have been all over it. He'd have used it. Oh yeah.
He's a social guy.
Yeah, the NIL and transfer portal, if that was back there in the 60s, Devaney would have figured out a way just to make it work for us. So,
well, even we talk about, using social media to your power. You have a lot of these different things that have changed in college ball, and you need a coach that can kind of use those as assets. Mm-hmm. And, whether it's the transfer portal, whether it's the NIL deal, it's just, there's got to be something you can do to kind of tweak that to kind of build your program up. And I mean, Rule's got experience doing that, and it's turned two programs around. I mean, if you can turn Temple around, I don't know how you couldn't turn Lincoln around,
No, they had one 10-win season in their history, and then he went ahead and had 2.
yeah, you know what I mean? It's just, I would like to think that the ball is going to bounce in our favor here. So,
well, we'll due. For the longest time, we were the most dominant program for decade after decade, and I know a lot of fans probably put a hex on us and said, you guys deserve to suffer for a while. Well, we've suffered. We've earned it. It's time for this to get turned back around now. So
I think Nebraska being relevant is good for college football in general too,
Yeah, I've talked with countless national people that say the same thing. I mean, college football is better when Nebraska is back up there. Same thing with Tennessee, and there's a number of other schools too that you want to see it. I did tweet something out on Sunday, and it was the I don't know if you caught this game at all, but it was the Raiders-Patriots game.
Oh, and yeah. I saw the highlight at the end of it.
That just bizarre, ridiculous finish of the Patriots throwing that weird lateral that gets caught in return. And my tweet was something to the extent of, hey, Patriot fans, when you've been on top for so long, sometimes the overcorrection is, it's painful, signed Husker Nation. It's like, we get it. We understand what it's like to have some crazy endings. And I can only go through, I can only come up with about 50 examples of the last 20 years, but hopefully, that starts to calm down and we've got the right guy and we'll see less of those. So
absolutely.
Well, Adam, this has been great. I've really enjoyed having you on here. And again, I love the story. I've been wanting to have you on. I was talking with you last summer when we stopped by. Sure, yeah. I think it's a great story of big town folks coming to the small town and what you guys have done there with the cafe. You've done a great job. I'm going to give you the floor. Kind of, plug what you guys are doing. How can people find you and everything, and just tell us again about the cafe.
Well, we're on most social pages. We've got Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We have a TikTok that I've delegated to a couple of our high school kids. But you can find us at NG City Cafe. We're open Monday through Friday, 7 to 2. If you make a day trip of it, there's several stores along Main Street. If you want to kind of get out and support a local small community, if nothing else, come get a slice of pie. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and tell them the Redcast sent you. You're not going to get any % off of that, but just tell them the Redcast sent you. That I always like telling people to do that. But I mean, it's like I said, I had a great time. We've been up there 2 or 3 times now. My family, they want to go back again here, and we've had great food every time we've gone there. So I just that's an easy plug for you there. The
it's
food
a
is
mom
well
and
worth it.
pop kind of dive, but we try to, as best as we can, try to come out and engage with people, especially if we know they're from out of town or we know they're coming up. Give us a heads up, and we'll put you on the menu board and give you a shout out there. And it's people want to feel special, and there's no reason why we can't do that. And acknowledge people making the effort to come up and see us. So
that's true. That's one of the things you do with social is that message board that you guys write on every morning, the menu and stuff. And my coworker I was telling you about, Carl, came up there, and that was right. He reached out to you, so you guys put his that was right. You put his birthday down. It was like, happy birthday, Carl. So like, what a welcoming thing. Like, this is small town, nice Nebraska. Is that you drive up to the front door and there's a sign already saying happy birthday and welcoming you in there. That's pretty cool.
Well, in today's day and age with social media, you can kind of share that with people, and it just makes people feel special. And it literally took me 4 seconds to write that and acknowledge him, when he came up. And so, I don't know, trying to, there's so much craziness going on in this world, if that can put a smile on someone's day or make their day or, whatever it is, then so be it. I'm glad to do it.
Well, this has made my day. I hope this has made you, all of your days that have been watching this, folks. All right, take us out here. I always give the parting shot to our guests. So, parting shot can be about anything you want, Husker football, whatever, and go.
Oh, well, I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Same here. Yeah, same back to you.
Yeah. So support local wherever you're at. If you're in Omaha or Lincoln or in a small town or wherever, we really strongly encourage people to support small businesses, and they're kind of the backbone of this country. And I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you. Well, Adam Witchell, his wife Dawn, Newman Grove City Cafe, Redcasters, Fan Foreigners, go out there. Make sure. I mean, it's fun. It's awesome. Go out there. Go to the other small towns around it. And thank you so much for joining us. And just remember, you too could be the next one to join us on the forum.
A Herd at Sports Network production.